Our pagan past stretches back over 5,000 years. An ancient people covered the landscape with stone monuments. One time the Channel Islands were covered in hundreds of these. In fact, we had more ancient monuments here than any other part of Europe. Many now have long since disappeared. But not all of them are gone. Even today, the visitor to the Channel Islands can see a lot of strange stones sticking out of the ground. These are single standing stones called menhirs. They come in different sizes, but they all have one thing in common. They're huge, heavy things. And it would have taken a lot of time and trouble moving them, setting them upright in the ground like this. There have been lots of theories as to why these shapeless lumps of rock were placed upright in the landscape. But perhaps they weren't quite as shapeless as we might think. Look at these menhirs in Guernsey. There's nothing shapeless about these. This is the grandmother menhir at Castell St Martin's Church, clearly built in the shape of an old woman. So, when we look again at some of the menhirs in Jersey that seem so shapeless, it's actually possible to see a sort of similar female shape, with the head tapering down to a much fuller body. And that could explain why menhirs in Jersey and Guernsey are often called dames blanches, or white ladies. Did these white ladies represent a kind of divine presence in the landscape, a sort of immortal living goddess? As well as menhirs, there are a lot of other stone burial chambers in the Channel Islands. These would have contained multiple human burials, as well as grave goods like pottery and perhaps some tools. These chambers would have come in different sizes, from the very small, called cists, to the much bigger ones, known as dolmens. This is the Foldway dolmen in Jersey. Originally, it would have been covered in a huge round earth mound. This is a mound of Hogue Bay dolmen, perhaps the biggest dolmen in the whole of Europe. The mound here is so large it's like a natural hill, and it's big enough to build a church on top. Even more than the menhirs, it must have cost a colossal effort to build these ancient dolmens. Why did these people go to all that trouble? What obsession drove them to carve out these huge stones with their basic tools and somehow transport them to the chosen building site at huge trouble and cost? Foldway dolmen is a much smaller dolmen than Hogue Bay, but just look at the size of that capstone. It's a huge lump of granite, believed to have come from the nearby stretch of coast. It's hard to imagine the trouble involved in conveying that huge mass of rock up such a steep slope. Dolmens, as we have said, were burial chambers. But there's another clue to their use, and it can be found in the fact that, unlike modern tombs or burial sites, these had an entrance to them. And it can be argued that these entrances were much less for the use of people than to admit something else into the chamber. And that something is light. Most visitors to Hogue Bay soon find out that the entrance to the dolmen is aligned with the sunrise at the time of the equinox. Twice a year, at dawn, the entrance to the dark chamber floods with red light as the rising sun shines into the chamber. It really is a magnificent sight. But what's perhaps less well known is that the entrance to the Foldway dolmen is aligned to the rising moon every September at the time of the equinox. Anyone who climbs to the top of this dolmen can see the moon rising from the sea below in direct alignment with the entrance.